Dark history of Poveglia Island. Poveglia's eerie history begins in the Roman era, when it was used to isolate plague victims to prevent the disease from spreading to mainland Italy. During the Black Death in the 14th century, and later during subsequent outbreaks of the plague, the island became a quarantine zone, effectively a death sentence for those sent there. Victims, often still alive, were thrown into mass graves or burned in large pits. It's estimated that over 160,000 people perished on the island. Locals say that the soil itself contains human ash from the cremations. It's said that the screams of the dying echoed across the lagoon, and even today some visitors claim to hear them on quiet nights. The island earned the nickname the Gateway to Hell due to the staggering number of deaths that occurred there. Over centuries, its soil became a mix of earth and human ash. Locals believe the ground itself holds the anguish of the countless souls who perished there, and many describe an overwhelming sense of dread and despair when near the island. The Asylum and the Mad Doctor. In 1922, a psychiatric hospital was built on Poveglia. The isolation of the island made it an ideal place to house those deemed mentally ill, but conditions were far from humane. Patients claimed to hear whispers and screams at night, and staff dismissed their accounts as hallucinations or paranoia. However, rumors soon spread of something darker. The hospital's lead doctor reportedly performed inhumane experiments on the patients. Using crude tools, he conducted lobotomies and other barbaric procedures, believing these methods would uncover the secrets of the human mind. Patients often died during these experiments, their cries for mercy echoing through the halls. Eventually, the doctor himself succumbed to the island's sinister atmosphere. According to legend, he was haunted by the ghosts of his victims, who drove him insane. He climbed to the top of the hospital's bell tower and threw himself off. Witnesses claimed that his fall didn't kill him immediately. Instead, a mysterious mist enveloped his body, and he screamed in agony before finally succumbing to death. To this day, visitors report hearing the faint tolling of the bell tower, even though the bell was removed decades ago. Paranormal encounters. Though Poveglia is officially closed to the public, thrill seekers, ghost hunters, and paranormal investigators have made illicit visits. Their experiences paint a chilling picture. Disembodied voices. Many have reported hearing faint cries, moans, and whispers in languages they couldn't understand. These sounds often seem to come from the hospital ruins or the mass graves. Unexplained shadows. Shadowy figures are often spotted moving through the hospital corridors or standing at the edge of the island. Some visitors say the shadows seem to follow them, growing closer as they try to leave. Physical sensations. Several people have described feeling touched, pushed, or even scratched by unseen forces. Some have left the island with bruises or marks that appeared inexplicably. A particularly chilling story comes from a paranormal investigation team who visited the island at night. They reported hearing loud bangs and screams from the hospital, but when they entered the building, it was empty. As they attempted to leave, their boat engine mysteriously failed, leaving them stranded for hours in the darkness. The fear among locals. For Venetians, Poveglia is a place of pure dread. Fishermen refuse to cast their nets near the island, fearing they might pull up human remains. Tour guides avoid even mentioning its name, and locals warn tourists not to try visiting. They believe the island is cursed and that anyone who disturbs its restless spirits will face misfortune or worse. One tale tells of a group of young men who boated to Poveglia for a dare. They planned to stay the night in the abandoned hospital, but returned before dawn, visibly shaken. They claimed they had seen shadowy figures in the windows and heard voices chanting from the bell tower. They never spoke of the experience again, but one of them was said to have disappeared under mysterious circumstances years later. Would you visit? Despite its haunting allure, Poveglia remains a chilling reminder of humanity's darkest moments. Its decaying hospital, looming bell tower, and silent mass graves stand as testament to the suffering endured there. For those brave enough, or foolish enough, to visit, the question remains, can you leave Poveglia without taking part of its darkness? The haunted Palazzo Dario. Palazzo Dario, often called the House That Kills, is one of Venice's most infamous and cursed landmarks. Located near the Grand Canal, this stunning Gothic palace hides a sinister reputation behind its beautiful facade. Built in the late 15th century, the Palazzos architecture is admired by tourists, but locals avoid it, whispering tales of death, financial ruin, and inexplicable misfortune tied to anyone who owns or resides in the property. The Curse of Palazzo Dario. The legend begins with the house's first prominent owner, Giovanni Dario, a wealthy merchant. After moving in, his family's fortune began to crumble. His daughter Marietta reportedly died by suicide after her fiancé abandoned her, and Giovanni himself faced financial ruin. These tragedies sparked rumors of a curse, claiming the house would destroy anyone who dared to live within its walls. Since then, a string of unfortunate events has befallen nearly every owner of Palazzo Dario. In the 19th century, an aristocrat who purchased the palazzo was murdered shortly afterward. Another owner, an American millionaire, suffered severe financial losses and mysteriously died under unclear circumstances. In the 20th century, the tenor Mario del Monaco was set to purchase the property but backed out after a near-fatal car crash on the way to sign the paperwork. Perhaps the most chilling story is that of Raoul Gardini, a wealthy Italian businessman. He bought the palazzo in the 1980s, but his life quickly spiraled out of control. He became embroiled in a major financial scandal and tragically died by suicide, further cementing the house's cursed reputation. Tourist tales and creepy encounters. Visitors passing by Palazzo Dario often report a strange, unshakable feeling of unease. Tourists have shared eerie experiences, such as flickering lights. On nights when the palazzo is unoccupied, some have claimed to see faint lights flickering inside the windows, even though the building is abandoned. Distorted reflections. A few gondoliers say the palazzo's reflection in the water looks warped or ripples unnaturally, even when the canal is still. Camera malfunctions. Tourists attempting to photograph the building have reported that their cameras suddenly stop working, or the images come out distorted with strange shadows or blurred figures. The ghosts of Palazzo Dario. Some locals believe the palazzo is haunted by the spirits of those who died tragically within its walls. Visitors have reported seeing ghostly figures in the windows, especially near dusk, and hearing faint whispers or sobbing when passing by at night. Gondoliers often avoid lingering near the palazzo, claiming they've heard unexplained noises emanating from inside, despite it being vacant. One chilling account involves a tourist couple who rented an apartment nearby. Late one night, they reported hearing loud banging from the direction of the palazzo, followed by the sound of a woman crying. When they peered out their window, they saw a faint light in the upper floors, though the building was supposed to be empty. They later learned from locals that no one had been inside for years. Would you visit Palazzo Dario? Palazzo Dario remains a haunting enigma in Venice. Its curse has scared away buyers for decades, and even the bravest tourists tread cautiously around it. While its facade is undeniably beautiful, it hides a dark history of tragedy, loss, and death. If you ever find yourself admiring the Grand Canal, you might think twice before lingering near this house of horrors. Would you dare take a closer look, or would you keep your distance?
The disorienting labyrinth of alleys. Venice is famous for its narrow, winding alleys that weave through the city like a maze. By day, these pathways feel charming and picturesque, but by night, they can transform into something far more sinister. The lack of proper street lighting, the echoes of distant footsteps, and the stillness of the canals create an unnerving atmosphere that has left many travelers with chilling stories to tell. Lost in the shadows. One traveler shared their experience of getting lost in Venice at night. After a late dinner, they decided to walk back to their hotel without using a map, confident they'd find their way. As they meandered through the alleys, the streets seemed to twist and turn in ways they didn't recognize. The walls felt closer, the passages narrower. Suddenly, they found themselves in a quiet square surrounded by tall, shadowy buildings. The square was eerily silent, save for the faint sound of water lapping against the nearby canal. They looked around for any sign of life, but saw no one, no lights in the windows, no movement. As they turned to retrace their steps, they heard soft footsteps behind them. They stopped and glanced over their shoulder, but the alley was empty. Brushing it off as nerves, they walked faster, only for the sound to grow louder, matching their pace. The traveler panicked, breaking into a run, only to trip and fall. When they looked up, they realized they were back in the same square, though they were certain they had gone in a different direction. Unseen laughter. Another story comes from a couple who visited Venice during the off-season. One evening, they decided to take a leisurely walk, hoping to enjoy the quieter, less crowded streets. As they wandered deeper into the alleys, they began to hear faint laughter echoing around them. At first, it seemed playful, like a group of children giggling in the distance. But as they continued walking, the laughter grew louder, sharper, and more menacing. It seemed to follow them, bouncing off the walls, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. Feeling unnerved, they turned back toward their hotel, only to find themselves repeatedly ending up at the same dead-end alley with a boarded-up door. They stumbled upon a familiar street and hurried back to safety. When they asked their hotel receptionist about the alley, she gave them a strange look and said, "There's no alley like that in this area." The shifting streets of Venice. Venice's layout has long been a source of fascination and confusion. Some locals believe the city's alleys are alive, shifting, and rearranging themselves, especially at night. This belief is tied to an old Venetian legend about spiriti perduti, lost spirits who wander the city's streets, seeking company. It's said that these spirits sometimes lead travelers astray, trapping them in loops until dawn, when the spell is broken. One chilling tale involves a solo traveler who ventured out late to find a small cafe. As they navigated the darkened alleys, their GPS malfunctioned, repeatedly pointing them to a non-existent bridge. Eventually, they found themselves at the edge of a canal with no way forward. Across the water, they spotted a figure standing motionless in the shadows, watching them. Thinking it was a local, they called out for directions, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, it stepped backward into the darkness and disappeared. Moments later, the traveler felt a cold breeze behind them and turned to find the street they'd just walked down was no longer there, only another canal. Would you dare explore alone? While Venice is undoubtedly a beautiful and romantic city, its dark alleys and eerie quiet at night hold an undeniable sense of mystery. For those brave enough to wander its labyrinthine streets after dark, be warned, the city's charm may turn into something far more haunting. Would you risk getting lost in Venice's shadows, or would you stick to the safety of the main squares? The Phantom Masked Ball. In a city as rich in history as Venice, it's no surprise that tales of the supernatural often intertwine with its legendary traditions. One of the eeriest legends involves an otherworldly masked ball, said to take place once a year in one of the city's abandoned palazzos. While Venice is known for its grand masquerade balls during Carnival, this particular event is something entirely different, a party where the guests are rumored to be more than just human. The invitation. The story goes that every year, on an unmarked night, a select few individuals receive an elegant, hand-delivered invitation. Written in elaborate script, the invitation bears no return address and simply reads, "You are cordially invited to an evening of revelry, decadence, and secrecy. Midnight. Campo Maledetto. The mysterious Campo Maledetto, or Cursed Square, isn't marked on any map, but those who accept the invitation reportedly feel an unexplainable pull, guiding them through Venice's labyrinthine streets to a decrepit yet grand palazzo. The party begins. Guests who claim to have attended describe the palazzo as eerily pristine on the inside, despite its decaying exterior. A grand staircase leads to a ballroom lit by thousands of flickering candles, their glow reflecting off walls adorned with gilded mirrors and fading frescoes. Everyone at the party is masked, and the elaborate costumes seem to span centuries, from Renaissance nobility to 18th century courtiers, even to eerie, otherworldly designs. The music is hauntingly beautiful, played by musicians who never remove their masks. At first, the atmosphere is intoxicating, dancing, laughter, and flowing wine. But as the night wears on, an unsettling realization sets in for those bold enough to notice. Some of the guests are unnaturally still, their movements too smooth or their masks hiding faces that don't seem entirely human. A chilling revelation. Story tells of a man named Luca, a curious traveler who stumbled upon the invitation left on a cafe table. Intrigued, he decided to attend. Initially dazzled by the opulence of the ball, he began to feel out of place as the night went on. The guests spoke in languages he didn't recognize, and their laughter sometimes sounded more like a hiss. At one point, a masked woman approached him, her voice smooth as silk. She asked him to dance, and he obliged, though he noticed her hand was ice cold. As they danced, she whispered, "You don't belong here, do you?" Panicked, Luca excused himself and tried to leave, but the door he had entered through was gone, replaced by a solid wall. When he turned back, the guests had stopped dancing and were all staring at him, their masks tilted slightly as if observing a curious specimen. Desperate, Luca ran to a window and leapt into the canal below. He swam to safety and found himself back in a familiar square, dripping wet and shivering. The palazzo he had just escaped from was nowhere to be seen. The midnight deadline. It said that the ball ends abruptly at midnight. Any uninvited guest still present when the clock strikes 12 is never seen again. Locals claim that on these nights, a faint sound of music and laughter can be heard echoing through the streets, but no one dares investigate. Those who manage to leave before midnight often wake up the next day with no memory of how they returned home. Some report finding strange items in their possession, an antique mask, a piece of jewelry, or even a goblet etched with unfamiliar symbols. Others claim to have developed an unexplainable fear of masks, avoiding even the most benign carnival decorations. The legend of the masked hosts. According to Venetian folklore, the ball is hosted by spirits of nobles who perished during the city's darkest days, victims of betrayal, the plague, or other tragedies. Bound to the palazzo for eternity, they host the ball to lure the living into their world, blurring the line between the realms of the living and the dead. Masks, they say, are not just for disguise, they're the only thing keeping the spirits from revealing their true, horrifying faces. Some guests who've attended the ball claim to have seen glimpses beneath the masks, hollow eyes, decaying flesh, or even faces that shift and shimmer like water. Would you accept the invitation? The story of the phantom masked ball serves as both a cautionary tale and an alluring mystery. For those who dream of Venice's grandeur and romance, the idea of a secret, decadent party might be too tempting to resist. But be warned, in a city built on water and shadow, not everything is as it seems. If you ever find a mysterious invitation, think twice before following its call. You might not return the same.
If you like creepy stories like these, please subscribe to the channel.